Good morning. I want to invite you to turn with me to Matthew chapter 5 this morning, please. Matthew chapter 5. And I want to read beginning in verse 27 of that context. Matthew 5, verse 27. You've heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks on a woman to lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it's better for you that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it is better for you that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to go into hell. I want us to think for a little bit this morning about the kind of holiness that God calls, that Jesus here in this context is calling you and I to commit to. In thinking about our being grounded in God's truth this year, and in thinking about our growing in God's purposes this year, the need to be holy is something that's really convicted me. As we've read through the letter that Jesus sent to us through James, I've thought about the need for myself to be more holy, more dedicated to God's purposes. God is holy. And when I'm holy, it makes possible my getting closer to Him. Does that make sense? I mean, He is holy, and if I want a relationship with Him, He's called me to be like Him. God's truth that He reveals to us when He gives us His commandments and when He gives us His instructions, none of His truth is arbitrary. Whether it's truth that pertains to worship, whether it's truth that pertains to us as a congregation, whether it's truth that pertains to our personal walk, all of that reveals something about His nature, about the things that He loves, about the things that He thinks, about His ways. And so if I want to be close to Him, if I want an intimate relationship with God, I need to respect that truth, because that truth that's who He is. And so I need to love it because it's Him, and practice it because I'm His son and I'm His daughter. And so I want to look like my Father. Also, being holy is what makes us useful to God. If I am not holy, then God He's got to work on getting me humble first. He's got to work on my transformation. If I'm not holy, then other people are going to look at me as a believer, and I'm going to be a stumbling block, and they're coming to God because my holiness or my unholiness is going to stand in the way of them seeing what they need to see from God in me. And so my usefulness to God is dependent on my being holy the way that He's holy. The text that I've chosen here this morning from Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 and following, as Jesus is talking about what the law said about not committing adultery, and what He says by way of application of that truth, gives us insight into the kind of holiness that Jesus has called us to. And I want to say some things quickly this morning about what this holiness looks like. And the first thing that I want you to note is that the kind of holiness that Jesus has called you and I to is a heart holiness. It's a heart holiness. Jesus is not just looking for people that don't commit adultery. He's not just looking for people that don't steal. He's not just looking for people who don't take the Lord's name in vain. That there's a deeper holiness that He's after than just a holiness about the right behavior. Do you see that in the text? He's not looking just for me to change my behavior. He's looking for me to change my heart. He's not looking for me to change my deeds. He's looking for me to change even the things that I want. I mean, the things that I dream about, the things that I drool over, the things that I fantasize about. And so he says, you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks on a woman to lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. Do you see how he's getting past the behavior, and he's looking at my impulses? Like what it is that I want to do, what it is that I think about or fantasize or dream about doing. He wants to rule over, Jesus does. He wants to be the Lord over my impulsive, spontaneous thoughts and reactions. Is that not what he's getting at the text? I'm confronted with a person. I'm confronted with a situation. I'm confronted with a temptation. And it's not just lust is the thing that's specifically in consideration here, but there's all kinds of things that draw me away and that entice me, as James talks about in James 1. So here I am, and I'm confronted with a person, a situation, a temptation, and what Jesus wants in me is for my knee-jerk reaction. He wants my knee-jerk reaction to be to think holy, to love purity, to be righteous. He wants holiness and purity not even to be my second nature. He wants it to be my nature. He wants it to be who I am. So I'm confronted with a temptation, and He wants my heart to run to the right kind of thinking, the right kind of affection. And so He wants me to stop that enticement in my heart. He's not, and so the standard He sets is a higher standard than just the standard of a clean record. But the irony is that the standard of a clean record is not a possible standard, is it? I mean, we've all already messed that up. I can't go back and erase all the wrongs that I've done, and I'm going to do more wrongs in the future. And so the standard He sets is not one of a clean record. He sets the standard of a clean heart. Now, I mess up more with having a clean heart than I do with having a clean record. But if I run after the standard of a clean heart, I'm going to find acceptance with Him. If that's my pursuit, then I'm going to find He's going to receive me when that's the thing that I'm pursuing. And so ironically, the higher standard is really the only one that's attainable, is when I'm pursuing a clean heart rather than that of just a clean record. Now, heart holiness is what Jesus wants in me. He wants me when I am challenged, when my temper is challenged, when my tongue threatens to become unbridled, when I'm provoked by the actions of someone else, when I see a billboard or when I see the tripe that's on TV, when I am confronted with an opportunity to manipulate, or an opportunity to take advantage of my situation, or when it's more convenient to walk away than it is to do the right thing. Jesus wants me to have a heart where my knee-jerk reaction is to do the right thing, to want to do the right thing. Now, there's more than just a heart holiness that Jesus calls us to here. Jesus also calls us to a happy holiness. It's a happy heart holiness. Sometimes I hear folks, when they talk about this passage, completely miss the point of what Jesus is about here. He's not giving people more reasons to get divorced because I think that my husband lusts, or because I think that that lust is adultery, and so gives me justification to put him away. I mean, he's not trying to break up more marriages with the instruction that He gives here. And so Jesus' intention is not to make me a bigger sinner when He says that adultery starts in my heart. He's not attempting here to catch me or to trip me up. And He's not calling me to a life of misery and despair because I fail in having the right kind of heart. He is not calling me to a holiness. Let me give you some things He's not saying here. He's not calling me to a bitter holiness. That's a holiness where I do good, but I really want to do bad. Like I do the right thing, but man, I go home and I regret the fact that I didn't do the wrong thing, or that I do the right thing, but I sure am jealous and covet over people that can do the wrong thing. He's not calling me to a hypocritical holiness where I just work on not getting caught. I'm not doing the right thing, but I'm careful about doing the wrong thing so that I don't get caught or so I hide it. He's not calling me to a naive holiness where I am doing the right thing, but I'm always sticking myself in compromising situations where I'm apt to fail or where I'm apt to stumble. I can't be foolish with the way I live life. That's not the kind of holiness He's calling me to. He's not calling me to an indifferent holiness. And I worry about this one where we just decide, I just don't care. I'm just going to do what I want to do. That's not the kind of holiness that He's calling us to. And He's not calling us to a despairing holiness. And what I mean by despairing holiness is a holiness where we just keep failing, where we just give up. Jesus helps tripping people. Jesus helps stumbling people. And so when He talks here about everyone that looks on a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart, He's not saying that so that more men stand condemned. He's saying that so that He motivates us to want to really do the right thing and not to feel frustrated and failing in doing the right thing, because nobody's more interested in our being holy than Him. But He wants us to be happy in that pursuit. He wants us to be happy in that pursuit of holiness, even as we fail, and not in that pursuit to be discouraged or to be despairing, but to be content in the pursuit of a pure life. He's calling me to want to really seek a right heart with Him, and to love that pursuit of being happy in that. Because the only way for you and I to be really happy, is when we're holy. I am never more miserable than when I'm unholy. I am never more unhappy than when I fail God. And I am most miserable when I'm not trying, when I'm not pursuing. And I get more reckless and I get more foolish because I'm trying to just escape from my mistakes. But when we are running after having impulses that run with God, when that is our pursuit, and when we are looking to be happy about that, that's the kind of holiness, that's the kind of pursuit that God can bless. So Jesus is calling me to a heart holiness and to a happy heart holiness. I want you to see that this happy heart holiness is a practical holiness. It's very practical. The only way that I'm protected and the only way that I'm safe from the sin that He has in mind in this context, the only way that I'm really protected and really safe from adultery is that if it never enters my heart, right? I mean, that's the only way that I'm really protected. The only way I'm immune is if I live a life like I'm not immune. The only way that I can really be defensive is if I have an aggressive offense. And so what Jesus is calling me to in my walk is to a militant personal holiness. That I'm going to pursue holy like I'm going to war. And if there's something that gets in the way, if there's something that is impeding my holiness, then I'm going to chop that thing off. If there's something that is getting in the way of me being right with God, then I am going to declare war on that for God's sake. And I'm going to get rid of whatever the thing is that keeps causing me to stumble, that's going to keep causing me to fall. And I'm going to be happy about it because I'm doing it for God. I'm going to smile while I do it, because this is going to make me better for God. And so the holiness that He calls me to is very practical. Tear it out, He says. Cut it off. He talks about an amputation in order to deal with my sin. There's going to be some pain that's a part of that radical action. I don't know of an amputation that doesn't hurt, do you? If you pluck out your eye, if you cut off your hand, or if you cut off your foot, there's going to be some pain that's a part of that. But it is practical. The pain is a reminder of of the sacrifice of the choice that I've made for God. It's a proactive choice. He's not talking to me here about being passive and just saying, well, I hope I get better, or I hope I get more motivated. He talks about me taking some kind of action to do something about the things that cause me to stumble. It's going to take some honesty on my part that is very practical as well about where the real problem lay. Is the problem with my eye? Is the problem with my hand? Is the problem with my foot? I've got to be honest with where I trip up. I've got to be honest about where I trip up. I hope, make the message personal for you. I mean, what's keeping you from being what you need to be for God? Where do you need to change right now so that your heart is more what God wants to see in you? I'm talking to you, me. What does God want to change in your heart? What does God want you to be more happy about changing in your heart? What practical choice do you need to make that might involve some pain, that might involve some radical action, that might involve cutting something out, that might involve ripping something up? You know, there are some people that I have found in my life that I can't be around because I am not the person that I need to be for God when I'm around them. Now, I know, and I've had to make those choices at times. And I know that you've probably had to make those choices too. There's some places I can't go because I am not holy when I'm there. There's some places, some things I can't read. There's some things I can't watch. There's some things that I can't even let myself think about because when I think about them, I go to a bad place. Now, that is weakness. Yes, that's weakness. That's precisely the point. I am weak when I'm with that person. I'm weak when I'm in that place. I am weak when I read that or when I go there or when I think that. And so I can't put myself in a position where I am weak, where the devil can put me in captivity. That is not being holy when I do that. And so I've got to be honest about that weakness. And I've got to fly to Him, but not in a despairing way, in a happy way, in a heartfelt way. I'm going to look funny when I've cut off my foot or my leg. I'm going to be handicapped when I've removed the hand that offended. I'm not going to see as well when I've got one eye, when I've denied myself something that is a right. But when I give up my rights, because the exercise of my rights make me wrong, God is going to bless that. The last thing I want you to see in the text is that the holiness He calls me to is a holiness that's sacrificial. It's a holiness that's sacrificial. And so in these practical things that He says, like plucking out the eye and like cutting off the hand, I want you to see that for all of us, for every one of us, God, Jesus and God have called me to make a personal investment in my redemption. Jesus made sacrifices so that you and I could be holy. And as a part of redemption, one of the things that's going to happen in my life is that I'm going to make some sacrifices too. That the old man has got to die. And being crucified with Christ is going to require some sacrifice on my part. Some investment along with God in the change that He wants to bring in me so that I can be redeemed. And that's part of the way that I show my faith in Him, is that I will give this up for you, God, because I trust That the blessedness that I'll find in being holy is better than the satisfaction I'll find in being unholy. And so I'm going to give this up for you, and I know that you will bless it. The motivation for me to be sacrificial in my holiness is that Jesus gave up everything to be like us. I mean, everything. He didn't have to leave heaven. He didn't have to become like us. He didn't have to subject Himself to pain. He didn't have to know sorrow. He didn't have to know hunger. He didn't have to know death. He didn't have to experience any of those things. He gave up everything to be like us. Why can't I give up something to be like Him? Just a little something. He gave up everything to be like us, and He wants us to give up everything to be like Him. Jesus gave up His rights so that He could be right for us. And He calls us to give up our rights so that we can be right for Him. Jesus denied Himself because He wanted us. He denied Himself because He wanted us. And He calls us to deny ourselves because we want Him. He wants us to deny ourselves because we want Him. And that's what the pursuit of holiness is. It is a heart that wants God. And it's a heart that is happy with having God. And it's a heart that does the practical things, the sacrificial things that are needed so that we can own God and He can own us. I can't think of anything better to possess than holiness. Can you? Heart holiness. Happy heart holiness. Happy heart holiness that is practical and sacrificial. Brother or sister, if you're not happy this morning, then the absence of happiness in your life is somehow connected to your holiness or the lack thereof. And if you are outside of Christ, whatever sorrow there is in your life and whatever emptiness is in your life is connected to the absence of you being intimate with God. You get rid of your sin, you be washed in the blood of the Lamb. You offer to God a heart that wants Him and that desires to magnify Him in your life. And you'll find real happiness. I want to invite you this morning to the kind of holiness that Jesus calls us to. If there's a change that you need to make in your life as a follower of Jesus Christ, then won't you make that change? And whether that change involves something that you acknowledge before our group so that we can pray for you before your brothers and sisters and we take that before the throne, or whether it's a decision that you make in your own heart this morning of a change that you need to make and a determination to do so. Or if there's something, if you just need to talk to a brother or sister, then do something about that today. And if you need to put Jesus Christ on in baptism and become a soldier of the cross, become a follower of the Lamb, then come this morning. Let's get holy for God, shall we? As together we stand and as we sing.